I had not spoken in 12 days when they brought the human before my throne. In the Aethari Empire, silence from an Empress is more terrifying than war. Entire star systems tremble when I lift a finger. Yet after my brother's death on the outer border, after his fleet burned in a rebellion I should have foreseen, I found that I could not lift anything at all. Not my voice, not my will. The ascension right awaited me. For 9,000 years I have renewed my body in the chamber of radiance, shedding age like dust, stepping back into eternity as easily as one steps through a doorway. Another 1,000 years could have been mine in 3 days. I refused. The High Council called it grief. They whispered of instability. They did not understand that eternity suddenly felt like a punishment. When they announced a Terran cargo pilot had requested audience, claimed he carried a final message from my brother, I almost ordered his execution for the audacity alone. Humans live less than a century. To my kind, they are sparks in the dark. Brief, fragile, forgettable. Yet I allowed him in. Daniel Reed did not kneel properly. He did not avert his eyes quickly enough. The court hissed at the insult of his presence. He stood there in worn flight leathers, holding a small sealed data capsule in his hand. "My name is Daniel Reed," he said, voice steady. "Your brother asked me to give you this." And for the first time since the rebellion, my heart moved. I dismissed half the court with a gesture before I realized I had done it. They protested, of course. The High Council does not like being excluded from moments of potential weakness. But I did not want their eyes on me when I reached for the capsule in Daniel Reed's hand. It was small, crude by Aethari standards. Scratched metal casing. Human-made. Mortal. My brother would have found that amusing. "Speak," I told the human, my voice cold enough to frost the air between us. "How did you come to possess something so personal?" Daniel did not bow this time. He simply stood straighter. "I was assigned to Outpost K-47, he said. "Supply runs. Maintenance. Cargo hauling. Your brother visited during an inspection tour." A murmur rippled through the chamber. The border colony had collapsed months ago. Communications lost. Then the rebellion. Then the fire. "You are telling me," Chancellor Vorin interrupted sharply, "that a Valdrani prince—" "Aethari," I corrected softly. He flinched. "That the prince befriended a human mechanic?" Daniel didn't look at the Chancellor. He looked at me. "We were stranded," he said. "The mining core destabilized. Half the station lost atmosphere. Evac ships were weeks away. We had to seal sections manually. Your brother worked beside us. No rank. No ceremony. That was not like my brother. Or perhaps it was exactly like him. He had always resented the distance immortality placed between us and the living universe. He would linger among citizens, ask questions he already knew the answers to, touch machinery with his own hands rather than directing others to do it. "Continue," I said. "For a year," Daniel went on, "we kept that station from tearing itself apart. Systems failed every week. Radiation storms knocked out shields. We lost people." His jaw tightened. "A lot of people." "And yet you survived," Vorin sneered. Daniel ignored him. "He didn't act like a prince," he said quietly. "He asked about my parents. My home. What it felt like knowing I'd be old in 40 years. The chamber stilled. "Explain," I demanded. Daniel hesitated only briefly. He couldn't understand it at first. How we plan our lives knowing they end. How we fall in love knowing we'll lose each other. He said immortality meant never having to rush. Never having to choose. He swallowed. And I told him that's exactly the problem. Several nobles hissed openly at that. "You presume to lecture Aethari royalty on the value of existence?" Vorin's voice trembled with outrage. Daniel finally turned his head slightly toward the Chancellor. His gaze was steady, almost weary. "With respect, sir, I didn't lecture him. We talked. While patching coolant lines. While waiting for solar flares to pass. While watching people die." Silence followed that. I could almost see it. The two of them in dim industrial corridors. My brother in ceremonial armor stripped down to utility fabric. Hands blackened with grease. Laughing at something absurd. Something inside me tightened. "The capsule," I said. "Is it intact?" "Yes." "And the note?" He reached slowly into his jacket. The guards tensed, weapons humming. He withdrew a folded sheet of paper, real paper, yellowed at the edges. "He wrote this 3 days before the rebellion ships arrived," Daniel said. "He said if anything happened, I was to deliver both to you personally." "Why you?" Daniel's answer came without hesitation. Because I would come. That's simple. I took the paper first. My hands that had not trembled in a millennium, betrayed me. The handwriting was unmistakable. My brother's script, flowing and impatient. I did not read it yet. Tell me, I said instead. What changed him? Daniel's brow furrowed slightly, as if surprised by the question. He changed himself, he said. He started keeping track of moments. Small things. The way one of the engineers sang off-key during repairs. The way we celebrated surviving another week with ration coffee and terrible jokes. That is trivial, Voren snapped. Daniel looked at him then. No, he said quietly. It isn't. His voice did not rise. It did not need to. When you know your life is short, you don't get to postpone joy. You don't assume you'll have time later. You take it when it comes. He turned back to me. He envied that. The word struck harder than any accusation. Envied. My brother, second heir to a 10,000-year reign, envied humans. You expect us to believe, Voren began again, that the Prince of the Aethari questioned immortality because of idle conversation with a mechanic? Daniel shook his head. No, he said. Because he watched humans love. The chamber fell utterly silent. He watched one of our medics sit beside her dying husband for 6 hours straight, Daniel continued, holding his hand, talking to him, even after he couldn't respond. She knew she'd have maybe 20 years left herself. She didn't waste a second of it. He met my eyes again. He told me that night that immortality makes grief distant, manageable, that you learn to endure it because you have endless tomorrows. My chest tightened, and he wondered, Daniel said softly, what it would be like if every tomorrow wasn't guaranteed. I finally unfolded the letter. My brother's words blurred for a moment before resolving. Sister, asterisk if you are reading this, then I have failed you in person. Asterisk. My breath stopped. Asterisk Daniel once told me that humans measure life in heartbeats that matter. We measure ours in centuries that blur. I used to think that made us superior. Asterisk. Asterisk it does not. Asterisk. Asterisk I have lived for over 2,000 years, and only now do I understand urgency. Watching them choose love despite endings. Watching them risk everything for moments they cannot extend. Asterisk. Asterisk if I do not return, I ask you one thing. Do not renew out of habit. Asterisk. Asterisk read that line again. Asterisk. Asterisk do not renew because you fear stopping. Asterisk. Asterisk live because you choose to, not because you cannot bear to end. Asterisk. The paper trembled in my grasp. The court could not see the words from where they stood, but they saw my expression change. Daniel spoke again, voice quieter now. He didn't want you to forget what it means to feel, he said. He said eternity can make even grief feel optional. Optional. As if the pain consuming me could be set aside at convenience. But he was not wrong. We Aethari survive by compartmentalizing loss. We stretch it across centuries until it becomes history rather than wound. I folded the letter carefully. You remained on the colony until the rebellion, I said. Yes. And you survived when he did not. Yes. Why? The question hung between us. Daniel's jaw tightened. He ordered me onto the last shuttle, he said. Said I was better at fixing things than fighting wars. A faint, almost broken sound escaped my throat. That sounded exactly like my brother. He gave me the capsule and the note, Daniel continued. Told me to deliver them. Told me you would understand. I stepped down from the throne. Gasps erupted instantly. I rarely descended for anyone. I stopped an arm's length from him. He was older than I expected. Lines at the edges of his eyes. Silver in his dark hair. Finite. You grieve him, I said. Yes. Not a bow. Not an apology. Just truth. In his expression I saw something I had not allowed myself. Rawness. Unprotected sorrow. Humans live only 80 years, Voren said sharply behind us. What could he possibly understand of losing someone who would have lived thousands more? Daniel didn't turn this time. I've buried my parents, he said. My sister. 2 friends in accidents before they were 30. He looked directly into my eyes. Time doesn't make grief smaller. It just gives you more chances to feel it. The court shifted uncomfortably. And why? I asked slowly. Did you truly come, Daniel Reed? Do not lie to me. He held my gaze without flinching. Because he mattered to me, he said. And because you do. The chamber inhaled sharply. A human declaring such proximity to an empress bordered on treason. But there was no arrogance in his tone. Only conviction. You presume much, I said softly. Maybe, he admitted. But he believed you deserved the choice he never had. The ascension rite loomed in my thoughts. Renew, extend, continue, or stop. For the first time since my brother's death, I felt something other than emptiness. Not hope, not yet. Curiosity, and something more dangerous. Possibility. If you've watched this far, then this story is really interesting to you. Please confirm it by clicking like under this video. It doesn't cost you anything, but it will help me understand what story to publish for you next. Write in the comments who the alien woman in this story looks like, and who you would like to see in the next one. Let's move on. They thought they understood the game. The High Council had survived 12 millennia by believing that every action had a motive, every kindness a price, every terror a strategy. In their world, no one stood before the throne without wanting something in return. So they decided Daniel Reed must want something too. The summons was issued the following morning. Not to the private audience chamber, not to the observatory, the full Imperial Hall. They wanted spectacle. I allowed it. The chamber was carved from living crystal, light refracting into 1,000 fractured rainbows across polished floors. Noble houses stood in descending tiers, robes heavy with sigils of lineage and conquest. Above them, the banners of 100 subjugated systems shimmered in artificial starlight. And at the center, small, finite, human, stood Daniel. He wore the same flight jacket. He did not appear impressed. Daniel Reed, Chancellor Vorin announced, voice amplified through acoustic fields. You have been granted the rare privilege of extended audience. The council seeks clarity. He turned to me briefly, bowing lower than usual. Your radiance has shown unusual leniency. Unusual? I said nothing. Daniel glanced at me once before focusing forward again. Clarity about what? He asked calmly. Vorin's lip curled slightly. Your purpose. A low murmur passed through the hall. You claim to have befriended Prince Adrian Cross. My brother's name struck harder spoken aloud. You claim to carry his final wishes. You claim emotional proximity to the Empress herself. I didn't claim that, Daniel said evenly. You implied it. Daniel considered that. Maybe I did. Gasps fluttered through the chamber like startled birds. Vorin lifted one long, pale hand. Let us dispense with dramatics. You are a cargo pilot from New Chicago. No noble blood. No political leverage. No strategic value. Yet you have secured repeated private audiences with the Empress of the Aethari Empire. He stepped closer. What do you want? The question echoed. Wealth, influence, security, technology, longevity. Every species that encountered us eventually wanted something. Daniel did not answer immediately. He studied the crystal floor for a moment as if searching for the right words. Then he looked up. I want nothing. The chamber erupted in disbelief. Laughter, scoffs, a few open snarls. Impossible, one noble muttered. Arrogant, another hissed. Vorin's expression hardened. Everything has a price, human. Daniel shrugged slightly. Maybe where you're from. This is where I am from, Vorin snapped. Daniel nodded slowly. That explains a lot. A dangerous ripple moved through the hall. I felt it before anyone else. The shift. He wasn't afraid. Not of them. Not of me. Vorin changed tactics. Very well, he said coldly. If you seek nothing, then you will not refuse generosity. He gestured, and a projection field ignited in the center of the hall. Worlds appeared. Green planets, trade routes, resource clusters, land holdings on any imperial world, Vorin announced. A noble title within a minor house. Imperial citizenship. Access to extended medical augmentation. Lifespan enhancement protocols. That last one hung heavy. The closest thing we offered to immortality for lesser beings. Several nobles smirked. Now they thought they had him. You could live 2 centuries, Vorin continued. 3, perhaps. You could leave your primitive existence behind. Become something more. Silence stretched. Daniel looked at the projection, then at me, then back at Vorin. No, he said. Just that. No hesitation. No performance. Vorin blinked. Perhaps you misunderstand. I don't want your planets, Daniel interrupted quietly. I don't want a title. I don't want extended lifespan. A collective intake of breath swept the hall. You refuse imperial augmentation? A noble gasped. Yes. Why? Daniel's answer came steady. Because it wouldn't be mine. The words hit like a shockwave. You would reject improvement? Vorin demanded. Daniel shook his head. I would reject becoming something I'm not just because you think I should. Vorin's skin flickered faintly, anger patterns barely suppressed. Then what do you want? He pressed again. Daniel looked at me directly this time. Not at the throne. Not at the nobles. At me. There's a game, he said. The hall stilled. A strategy board, he continued. Your brother and I played it during power outages on the colony. He told me you used to play when you were younger. My breath caught. That was private. He started a match before he left for the rebellion, Daniel said softly. He said if he won, he'd ask you to try living differently. If he lost, he'd accept that eternity suits you. The chamber held absolute silence. He never finished it, Daniel said. I want to. Vorin stared as if Daniel had begun speaking a foreign language. You reject wealth and immortality, the Chancellor said slowly. For a board game? Daniel met his gaze. For closure. The word resonated. Closure. A human concept. Finite. Complete. Not deferred across centuries. Vorin turned to me sharply. Your radiance. This is manipulation of the highest order. Emotional leverage disguised as sentiment. I rose from the throne. The movement cut off further protests instantly. I descended the steps slowly, each echo deliberate. The hall parted. I stopped before Daniel. You wish to finish the game, I said. Yes. And if you win? He thought for a moment. I don't think it works like that. A flicker of something, unexpected, fragile, moved through me. And if you lose? I pressed. He gave a faint smile. Then I lose. It was absurd. It was small. It was profoundly human. And it disarmed the entire empire. I turned slightly toward the council. You offered him titles, I said evenly. Lands. Extended life. Yes, Vorin said stiffly. And he refused. Yes. Then your theory of manipulation collapses. Murmurs erupted. Or he is patient, Vorin countered quickly. Perhaps, I allowed. But I will determine that. I faced Daniel again. You will have your game. Shock rippled outward like a detonation. In private, the nobles bristled. You cannot, Vorin began. I can't, I said softly. And that ended it. As the court dissolved into whispers and scandalized tension, I held Daniel's gaze. He had refused immortality without blinking. Not because he was brave, because he was certain. For the first time in centuries, something stirred inside me that was not duty, not strategy, not grief. Interest, and something far more dangerous. Respect. The first time I laughed in 300 years, it was because Daniel cheated. Not in the game. In the silence. We did not meet in the Imperial Hall again after that spectacle, nor in my private chamber where surveillance glyphs hummed behind every wall. I chose a place forgotten by tradition, the upper observatory above the capital, a glass-veined dome suspended over the city's eternal dusk. The capital of Aethari Prime does not rotate. One hemisphere faces the star in perpetual brilliance. The other exists in endless twilight. The observatory rests at the boundary, where light and shadow bleed into each other without ever fully surrendering. It felt appropriate. Daniel arrived without escort the first night. I had dismissed the guards myself. That decision alone sent 3 noble houses into panic. He stepped into the dome and stopped, staring outward. The horizon burned gold where the star hovered motionless above frozen oceans of light. Behind us, the dark hemisphere shimmered with constellations. You live like this all the time? He asked quietly. Yes. He shook his head. No sunrise. No sunset. No change. There is change, I said. It simply occurs more slowly. He glanced at me. That's kind of my point. I pretended not to understand. The board was already arranged between us on a low crystalline table. Black and silver pieces carved in geometric patterns unique to Aethari strategy. He approached it carefully. You still remember how to play? He asked. I taught my brother, I replied. And he taught me. We sat. For a long moment, neither of us moved. You're letting me go first, he observed. I am generous. You're curious. That was also true. He made his opening move with quiet precision. Not reckless. Not aggressive. Measured. You said immortality feels like a prison. I began without looking at him. I said endless time without choice does. Explain the distinction. He leaned back slightly, studying the board. When you know you'll live forever, he said, you can postpone everything. Apologies. Love. Change. You assume there will always be time to fix it later. And you believe that is weakness? I think it's comfort. The word lingered. Comfort is not weakness. It can be, he said. if it keeps you from feeling anything real. I moved one of my pieces. You presume much about what I feel. He didn't immediately respond. You haven't renewed yet, he said instead. That is temporary. Is it? The question hung between us like a suspended blade. We played in silence for several minutes. He was good. Not masterful. Not yet. But perceptive. Adaptable. You are distracted, he noted eventually. I am evaluating you. That's not what I meant. I looked up sharply. He held my gaze without flinching. You're tired, he said. No one spoke to me that way. Not in centuries. I do not experience fatigue, I replied coldly. Not physically. The audacity. And you presume to diagnose the Empress of the Aethari Empire? I'm not diagnosing, he said quietly. I'm observing. His move blocked a strategic line I had not anticipated. You've lived for thousands of years, he continued. You've seen wars, collapses, expansions. You've buried lovers, allies, enemies. You've watched generations come and go. Yes. And most of it blends together now, doesn't it? The piece in my hand hovered over the board. I did not answer. He softened slightly. When Adrian talked about you, he said, he didn't describe a ruler. He described someone who used to sneak out of council sessions to watch meteor showers. Someone who once rewired half a ship herself because she didn't trust the engineers. A faint flicker of memory stirred. That was long ago. That's my point. I set the piece down more forcefully than necessary. You assume immortality erased who I was. I think it buried her, he corrected gently. The dome was quiet except for distant atmospheric hums. I do not require excavation, I said. Everyone does. I should have ended the meeting there, ordered him removed. But I did not. Instead, I asked, why do humans insist on assigning meaning to brevity? He considered the question carefully. Because it's all we have. That is sentimental. It's practical. He moved another piece. When my mother died, he continued, I was 22. I thought I'd have decades before I had to think about that. I didn't. He paused. I spent years wishing I'd asked her more questions, paid more attention, said things I assumed I'd say someday. His voice didn't break. It didn't need to. You regret postponement, I observed. Yes. And so you advocate living as though tomorrow is uncertain. Because it is. For you, I corrected. He looked up again. For you too, he said quietly. The words landed heavier than any challenge. I am immortal, I reminded him. For now. The air shifted. You speak as if you expect that to change. I think you expect it to. My next move was reckless. He noticed. You never used to play like that, he said absent-mindedly. You never played me before. He smiled faintly. Adrian said you hated losing. I do. Then don't. His piece slid into position. Check. I stared at the board. You baited me, I said slowly. You walked into it. A long pause. Then, unexpectedly, something unfamiliar rose in my chest. A sound escaped me before I could contain it. A laugh. Soft. Rusted. Surprising. Daniel froze. You just laughed, he said. I did not. You absolutely did. I am capable of amusement. He leaned back, satisfied. There she is. Who? The one your brother described. I should have felt insulted. Instead, warmth flickered, brief but undeniable. Do not presume intimacy, I warned. I'm not, he said. I'm just not afraid of you. That was new. Every species feared us. Even our own kind feared me. You should be, I said softly. Why? Because I could end your existence with a thought. He shrugged. You could. No trembling. No defiance. Just acceptance. Then why are you not afraid? Because if I was, you wouldn't have invited me here. The simplicity of it disarmed me again. We played 3 matches that night. He lost the first, won the second. The third remained unfinished when the star's light shifted subtly across the horizon. You should rest, I said. I thought your world didn't change. It does. Slowly. He stood. Will you renew? He asked quietly. That is not your concern. Maybe not. Silence. But it matters to me. The admission lingered between us. Why? I asked. He hesitated. Because if you renew out of fear, he said carefully, you'll lose yourself. And if I refuse, you might find her. The audacity of that statement should have angered me. Instead, it unsettled me. You are a mechanic, I said. I fix broken things. I am not broken. No, he agreed. You're just unfinished. He left then. I remained beneath the dome long after. For the first time in centuries, eternity did not feel inevitable. It felt optional, and that terrified me far more than death ever had. The first sign of the coup was not the blade. It was the silence. Aethari politics are rarely quiet. Power shifts like tectonic plates, slow, grinding, deliberate. Rumors ripple before rebellion ignites. Alliances fracture in whispers long before fleets mobilize. But 3 weeks before the attempt, something changed. The nobles stopped arguing. They stopped pressing for my renewal. They stopped mentioning Daniel Reed altogether. And that frightened me more than open dissent ever had. I sensed it during council sessions. Eyes that once burned with indignation now held calculation. Movements were too precise. Responses too measured. They were waiting. For what? I did not yet know. Daniel noticed before I spoke of it. "You're distracted again," he said one night in the observatory. We had abandoned formal matches by then. The board lay between us more as ritual than competition. "I am never distracted," I replied automatically. He raised an eyebrow. "You moved your central guard twice and left your flank exposed." I glanced down. He was correct. "I am monitoring political instability," I said. "That sounds like a complicated way of saying you're worried." "I do not worry. You do tonight." His perception unsettled me. "The noble houses are too quiet," I admitted. He leaned back, thoughtful. "On Earth," he said, "when a room full of angry people suddenly agrees on something, it usually means they found a common enemy." I held his gaze. "And who?" I asked softly. "Would that be?" He didn't answer immediately. He didn't need to. The observatory lights flickered faintly. A harmless fluctuation. Or a warning. 3 days later, it happened. The Imperial Hall was full. I had convened the council to address border instability, an excuse to observe them closely. Daniel was not meant to be present, but he had insisted on delivering a revised structural analysis for the orbital shield grid. A minor matter. Beneath Imperial attention. I allowed it. That decision nearly cost him his life. The attack came from House Varric. Ancient, influential, proud. They had lost trade authority during my reign. Publicly loyal, privately resentful. The assassin emerged not from the shadows, but from the light. Clever. A cloak projection field masked his approach. He materialized mid-stride between pillars, crystalline blade already ignited. The entire chamber froze for a fraction of a second. Long enough. I saw it. The trajectory, directly toward my chest. I could have stopped it. With thought alone, I could have shattered bone, crushed lung, erased the attacker from existence. But the distance was short, the angle precise, and something moved faster than I did. Daniel. He didn't hesitate, didn't calculate. He stepped into the path. The plasma blade struck him below the ribs. The sound was wrong. Not the elegant hum of ceremonial combat. A wet, tearing rupture. His body jerked. His eyes widened, not in fear, but surprise. Then he collapsed. Time fractured. The assassin did not survive the next breath. Neither did 3 of his accomplices. The hall erupted into chaos. Guards, shields, energy fields igniting. But none of it mattered. Daniel lay on the crystal floor. Blood, red, finite, human, spreading in stark contrast against refracted light. I dropped beside him. I had not knelt before anyone in 4,000 years. "Daniel." His breath hitched. "You're still here," he rasped. "The absurdity." "You foolish creature," I whispered. He tried to smile. "Worth it." His pulse was weakening. Rapid, erratic. Human physiology is fragile. Imperial medics surged forward, deploying containment fields. Stabilizers. Nanite infusions. Regenerative gel. But Aethari medicine is calibrated to Aethari biology. His body rejected half the intervention protocols. "Adjust," I commanded. They scrambled. "He is not stabilizing, your radiance." "Then adapt." His blood coated my hands. Warm. Mortal. He lost consciousness. The next hours blurred into mechanical precision. Emergency transport. Surgical intervention. Genetic compatibility recalibration. I refused to leave the medical chamber. Vorn approached once. "Your radiance, the council requires." "I do not care." His expression shifted. "The assassin has been identified. House Varric coordinated the attempt." "They no longer exist," I said evenly. It was true. Within minutes of the strike, Varric holdings were seized. Their fleet immobilized. Their name erased from the Imperial Registry. Political ramifications are irrelevant. He studied me carefully. "This is precisely what they feared," he said quietly. That you are compromised. I turned slowly. Compromised? Attached. The word was accusation. It should have angered me. Instead, it landed with clarity. Daniel lay inches from death. Not because he sought power. Not because he desired wealth. Because he chose to stand between me and harm. Leave, I said. Vorin hesitated. You love him, he said softly. Silence. I do not require your analysis. It is not analysis. It is fact. The machines hummed steadily. Daniel's vitals fluctuated dangerously. You have had lovers before, Vorin continued carefully. Companions. Political unions. Yes. You never remained beside their deathbeds. They were Aethari. They were immortal. The implication struck. They faded slowly, Vorin said. Centuries of decline. Predictable. Manageable. Daniel's condition was neither. He will age, Vorin added. Even if he survives this. I am aware. You will watch him weaken. I am aware. You will endure loss again. My voice sharpened. I have endured loss for 10,000 years. And yet this frightens you. The honesty of it cut deeper than accusation. Because it was true. This was different. Not because he was mortal, but because he chose. And I had chosen back. 3 days passed before he regained consciousness. I remained, unmoving. When his eyes opened, they were unfocused at first. Then they found me. You look terrible, he murmured weakly. Relief struck so violently, I nearly collapsed. You were impaled, I replied. Yeah, I remember. He shifted slightly and winced. Did I win? You lost spectacularly. He smiled faintly. Good. You call that good? If I'd lost you, that would have been worse. The simplicity of it silenced me. You are reckless, I said. You're welcome. His fingers twitched weakly. I took his hand. A human gesture. Once revolutionary. Now instinct. You could have died, I said quietly. I know. And you moved anyway. He looked at me steadily. A universe without you in it, he whispered. Didn't sound worth sticking around for. The words struck deeper than any blade. I had ruled for millennia. Commanded fleets. Crushed rebellions. Reshaped star systems. And none of it had ever made me feel what that sentence did. Fear. Not of losing power, but of losing him. For the first time since my brother's death, grief shifted. It was no longer hollow. It was protective, alive, and terrifying. Because I realized something in that sterile chamber filled with humming machines and the scent of human blood. Losing the throne would not break me. Losing Daniel Reed would. And that truth changed everything. They called it strength. The council, the noble houses, the admirals, the archivists, they called the ascension right a demonstration of strength. Renewal meant continuity, stability, proof that the Empress of the Aethari Empire remained eternal, unshaken, untouchable. They summoned me to the Chamber of Radiance 5 days after Daniel was declared stable. He could walk by then, slowly, carefully, a faint stiffness in his movement that would remain for months, perhaps longer. Human bodies do not forget trauma easily, neither do immortal ones. The chamber stood beneath the capital, carved from the oldest living crystal on Aethari Prime. It hummed faintly with ancient energy, its walls etched with the names of every renewal I had undergone. 47 times. Each inscription marked the shedding of age, the resetting of flesh, the continuation of rule. Each one had once felt like inevitability. Now they felt like repetition. The council assembled behind me as I stood before the sealed doors. Vorin at the forefront, silent but watchful. Your radiance, he began carefully. The attempt on your life has destabilized several outer systems. Rumors of vulnerability spread quickly. The Empire requires reassurance. I have already eliminated House Varric, I replied. Decisive, he acknowledged, but insufficient. He gestured subtly toward the chamber. The renewal will silence dissent. Behind us, dozens of nobles observed. Some hopeful, some anxious, some calculating. Daniel stood farther back, near the edge of the hall. He had insisted on being present. I had not forbidden it. You believe immortality equals authority, I said calmly. It equals continuity. And without it, questions. I turned slowly to face them. For 10,000 years, I have led this empire, I said. Have I ever faltered? No. Several responded immediately. Have I ever failed to defend it? No. Have I ever hesitated to sacrifice for it? A pause. No. And yet now, I continued. You question my strength because I hesitate to renew. It is not hesitation, Vorin said quietly. It is deviation. The word lingered. Deviation. From tradition. From expectation. From eternity. I glanced toward Daniel. He did not move. He did not nod. He did not encourage. He simply watched. The chamber doors began to glow faintly as activation protocols initiated. All preparations are complete, Vorin said. The rite required only my entry, my consent, my surrender to ritual. I stepped forward. Energy pulsed through the crystalline floor. I could feel it already, the ancient mechanism preparing to unravel cellular decay, to erase accumulated age, to reinforce immortality for another 1,000 years. The familiar sensation of inevitability brushed against my consciousness. And for the first time, it repulsed me. Your radiance? Vorin prompted. I looked at the inscriptions along the walls. 47 renewals. 47 continuations. Centuries blending into one another. Faces fading. Moments dissolving. Adrian's letter echoed in my mind. Asterisk, do not renew because you fear stopping. Asterisk. Fear. Was that what this was? A refusal to confront endings? I turned away from the chamber. Gasps erupted instantly. Your radiance, Vorin said sharply. I will not renew. The words landed like impact shockwaves. You cannot mean. I do. The hall exploded into overlapping voices. This is madness. The Dominion requires. You risk collapse. You risk irrelevance. I raised my hand. Silence returned reluctantly. You believe immortality defines leadership, I said evenly. You believe my endless existence stabilizes the Empire. It does, Vorin insisted. Or perhaps, I countered, it has made you dependent. A murmur. I have ruled through war, famine, expansion, and peace, I continued. Not because I am immortal, but because I choose to lead. And you choose now to weaken yourself? A noble demanded. No. I stepped down from the dais. I choose to remove the shield that has kept me distant. The words felt unfamiliar, but true. You misunderstand, Vorin pressed urgently. This is not distance. It is preservation. You will still be you. No, I said quietly. I will be reset. A subtle shift passed through the chamber. You do not reset memory, Vorin argued. No, I agreed. But I reset consequence. That silenced him. With renewal, I said, mistakes stretch into centuries of correction. Regrets become footnotes. Grief becomes diluted. I looked toward Daniel, and I no longer wished to dilute. Whispers intensified. You risk mortality, someone spat. I faced them fully. Yes. The admission stunned them more than refusal. You would reduce yourself to human fragility, a noble demanded. I would raise myself to human immediacy, I corrected softly. The distinction rippled through the chamber. I do not reject renewal to become mortal, I continued. I reject it to live without hiding behind eternity. Vorin stared at me. You would do this for him. The accusation hung heavy. I turned to Daniel. He did not speak. He did not plead. He did not look triumphant. He looked afraid. Not for himself. For me. I do this, I said slowly, because he reminded me that endless time without choice is imprisonment. Silence deepened. Humans age, Vorin said carefully. He will weaken. He will die. You will remain. Yes. And you accept that? I accept that love does not require symmetry. The words felt like stepping off a precipice. You will watch him fade, Vorin pressed. Yes. You will endure that pain. Yes. Why? I looked at Daniel fully then. Because he moved without calculation. Because he bled without hesitation. Because he refused immortality when offered. Because he chose me without strategy. Because I choose him, I said. The hall felt suddenly smaller. More fragile. And he will age faster, Vorin insisted. I am aware. And when he is gone, I will grieve. And then, I held Vorin's gaze steadily. And then I will continue. But I will continue having lived. The chamber doors dimmed as activation ceased. The rite was cancelled. Permanently. Shock rippled outward into the Empire within hours. News traveled faster than fleets. Markets fluctuated. Alliances trembled. Advisors panicked. And yet, I felt lighter. For the first time in centuries, I was not moving through predetermined eternity. I was stepping into uncertainty. And I was not alone. I descended fully from the dais and crossed the chamber floor. The council watched in stunned silence as I stopped before Daniel. Up close, I could see faint scarring where the plasma blade had pierced him. A permanent mark. Finite. Human. You understand what this means? He said quietly. Yes. You don't have to do this. I know. You'll still outlive me. Yes. And when I'm gone, I will not have lived in fear of that. His throat tightened. I didn't ask you to give up immortality. You did not. Then why? I reached for his hand. Not as Empress. As Liana. Because your love did not make me mortal, I said softly. It made me unwilling to hide. The council stood frozen. History shifted. And for the first time in 10,000 years, I did not feel eternal. I felt present. And that was far more powerful. We did not leave the Empire in flames. We did not abandon it in chaos. A successor was chosen within the year. Carefully, deliberately, without bloodshed. I remained as advisor during the transition, not as an immortal symbol, but as something far rarer, a ruler who had stepped down by choice. The shock eventually settled into reluctant respect. Daniel and I did not retreat to some distant frontier world. We stayed on Aethari Prime, in a smaller residence overlooking the twilight line where light and shadow meet. No throne, no endless ceremonies, just rooms filled with quiet mornings and arguments about trivial things that once would have been beneath my notice. He aged, slowly at first. Silver crept further into his hair. Lines deepened at the corners of his eyes. His movements grew measured, thoughtful. I did not renew. For the first time in my existence, I allowed time to mark me without erasing it. And strangely, I did not feel diminished. I felt real. One evening, decades later, we stood again in the observatory where it had begun. The star still burned at the horizon, eternal in its position. But we were not. You ever regret it? He asked softly. Which part? Choosing me. Choosing this. Letting eternity go. I turned toward him. His hands were older now. Warmer. Fragile in ways mine had never been. No, I said. Not for a moment. He studied my face as if memorizing it. You're still going to outlive me, he said. Yes. And that doesn't scare you anymore? It does, I admitted. He smiled faintly. Good. Means it matters. I stepped closer, pressing my forehead gently to his, an Aethari gesture once reserved for eternal bonds. Your love didn't make me mortal, I whispered. It made me alive. He closed his eyes. And in that quiet, beneath a sky that would outlast us both, I understood something my empire never had. Forever is not measured in years. It is measured in the courage to choose someone, knowing it will end. His life would be finite. Mine would stretch beyond his. But what we built between those limits would echo longer than any reign. And for the first time in 10,000 years. That was enough. Thank you for listening to this story to the end. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Write in the comments what moment in this story impressed you the most. And also check out the other videos that just appeared on your screen. See you in the next video.